There's one particular trail I've dreamt of walking for as long as I can remember. A trail that weaves through the raw, untamed beauty of the Isle of Skye. No signposts, no waymakers, just the land, the weather, and the miles ahead. I was supposed to do it last year, but just before setting off, I sprained my ankle. And then life happened, and a month slips by. The trail patch I bought still sits on my desk, untouched. I never pinned it to my corkboard because I told myself I'll only do that once I've actually walked the trail. For some reason, I kept putting it off, maybe because I was afraid it wouldn't match the version I've built up in my mind, afraid it wouldn't be enough. But some things don't let go. I think it's time to find out. The journey up from London to the far north was a bit of a slog. Long bus rides, missed connections, the usual sort of chaos. By the time I reached Broadford, the sun was already kissing the horizon. There wasn't much time to think. I just needed somewhere to stay for the night. The first night back wild camping is always a bit terrifying. Feels like I forget how to do it every time. I didn't make it far off the road before it got too dark to keep walking, so I settled for a random spot. Not ideal, but it would have to do. And just like that, it began. Not with a sense of calm or clarity, more of a stumble, a messy start to something I knew I'd come to love. The first few miles always feel a bit odd, like walking into a memory, something I've pictured 100 times before, but never quite like this. It's been a year since I did my last trail, and it shows. Getting back into rhythm takes a while. Walk, stop, set up the tripod, walk some more. Then the first light breaks through. The hues shifted from a muted green to that golden warmth I've missed. A soft yellow that makes everything feel alive again. It's exactly the quiet boost I needed. That slow, gentle warmth that seeps into your bones and reminds you of the simpler joys. Today's gonna be a long one. I've got some ground to make up after yesterday's late start, and the miles stretch out ahead, tempting me forward with the promise of views I know will be worth the effort. It didn't take long to reach the coastline. I grew up by the sea, so when I say I don't miss the ocean living in London, I'm probably lying. It has a magnetic force that makes me feel rooted, even when I'm so far from home. This wasn't like the lochs I passed on my last trip. Here, the blues were brighter, bolder, stretching endlessly to the horizon, to the edge of the world. It didn't even feel real. Like a color that doesn't exist on any palette. It looked like summer, but the wind at my back said otherwise. Crisp, clean, still unmistakably spring. I still haven't seen any of the otherworldly views that I came here for. But I also haven't seen a single person so far, which is really nice. And without a mobile phone network, it feels like a detox from the real world. Here, the quiet is loud, and the absence of others only makes the landscape feel more vast, more profound. You feel particularly small when you're the only one in such huge, sweeping landscapes. I found myself speeding up, rushing through this part, eager to see what's ahead. The path started to feel more exposed, with the wind picking up and the sense of salt growing stronger. It was as if the sea was calling me forward, urging me to keep moving, to get closer to what I knew was coming. More cars soon passed when I reached Torren. It was a reminder of the real world still existing beyond this wild place. I grew hungry, my energy drained by the hours of walking under the sun. I was relieved to spot a tea house, a small oasis of coolness and shade. It was the perfect break, a fleeting moment of calm before pushing onward. The wind changed direction as I left Torren, and I could start to smell the sea more distinctly. The land started to feel even more rugged, and I noticed the towering cliffs ahead, their jagged edges, like natural signposts guiding me toward Elgol. I didn't expect it to be this hot. The lack of wind made it feel like I was walking in a furnace. The trail was exposed, with no shade to offer relief. But the views, the constant shifting of the landscape, kept me going. Elgol felt like a sleepy village. By the time I reached it, nothing was open, and the streets were quiet. The calmness of the place was almost surreal, a gentle contrast to the intensity of the journey. It was exactly the kind of quiet I needed after the long miles behind me, a soft landing after a hard day's hike. Leaving Elgol, the trail began to get more rugged, the kind of wilderness I'd been craving. The path narrowed, and the cliff next to me started to drop off steeply. I did my best not to dwell on the thought of tumbling down. The curling hills ahead slowly began to glow, catching the first of the sunlight, casting shadows that made the landscape feel even more ancient. I paused for a quick breakfast at Sligachan Beach, a beautiful stretch of shoreline where I had originally planned to camp. With the quiet lapping of the waves and the endless sea before me, it felt like a secret pocket of peace, and the perfect way to gather some energy before pushing on. After that, the cliffs beside me were still steep, and the trail became even rougher. Fallen branches blocked the way, and the path felt like it hadn't been walked on in ages. These were very slow-going 3 kilometers. When I reached Camasunary Bay, walking through that valley among the towering mountains, crossing streams and lochs and the warm orange landscape, it felt like the Scottish Highlands I had always known. The ruggedness, the vastness, the quiet power of it all. The mountains, so colossal, had a way of making you feel small, like you hadn't moved at all, despite walking for miles. There was something humbling about it. It's almost comical how boggy Scotland can be, even when the sun is beating down. The ground sucked at my shoes with every step, but I kept moving, laughing at the irony of it. Seeing Sligachan was a sign of relief. Finally a resupply point after the long miles of yesterday and today. I crossed the famous Sligachan Old Bridge, with its three graceful arches framing the river and mountains beyond. Nearby, the Colley and Mackenzie statues stood quietly, a tribute to the mountaineers who first explored the Cuillin, a reminder of the spirit of adventure rooted deep in this place. I happily settled down at Sligachan campsite. I missed this routine, the rhythm of it, knowing there was a guaranteed comfy camping spot waiting with stunning views, followed by a hearty meal and a pint at the local pub. It was a reminder of how simple and fulfilling life could be in these wild places. After dinner, the sunset lights turned all the mountains a glowing orange. The Cuillin Mountains, towering and sharp-edged, reflected beautifully in the calm flow of the river Sligachan. I had mostly read about the iconic latter half of the trail, but these views completely took me by surprise, and I quickly fell in love with the landscapes shaped by the river, a place both wild and endlessly welcoming. Sleeping at a campsite gave me a sense of ease that wild camping never quite does. Still outdoors, still close to nature, but with just enough comfort to let my guard down. I woke to the most beautiful sunrise over the river Sligachan. That soft highland light, all the pinks and golds dancing across the river. Steam curling from a warm flat white in my hands. I could have stayed for hours, just watching the light shift, but I knew what lay ahead would be even more spectacular, and I didn't want to miss it. From the campsite, the trail wasted no time slipping back into wilderness. It picked up gently from where I'd left off, melting almost unnoticed into bog. Between the dark shoulders of the mountains, rivers wound their way toward Loch Sligachan, carving silver ribbons through the land, drawing delicate patterns into the earth. It felt like walking through a painting still in motion. Loch Sligachan stretched wide beneath me, too vast to take in all at once. It opened straight into the sea, blurring the line between freshwater and salt, between land and ocean. There's no clear edge, just water meeting sky. In the early light, the surface shimmered like glass, catching the sun in fleeting golden flashes. High up, I paused. Something at the shoreline caught my eye. A glimmer, a ripple of movement. Seals, a whole colony of them, bobbing gently in the shadows, as if the tide itself was rocking them to sleep. Unbothered, at peace. Back in Torrin, the folks at Amy's tea house had told me to skip this day, said it was mostly road walking, not worth it. Suggested I hitch a lift or catch the bus. But I'm glad I didn't. This stretch along Loch Sligachan was more than worth the miles. At some point, the trail just melted into the landscape and disappeared. The first of many times it would do that. I found myself halfway up a hillside. I must have looked ridiculous, squinting at the hillside like a secret trail might appear if I stared hard enough. Eventually, I gave up and made my way down to the road. Road walking in the afternoon sun is its own kind of misery. No shade, no breeze, just tarmac, heat, and the occasional car roaring past to remind you you're not as far from the world as you thought. And in those moments, you really do wonder, why am I doing this the hard way when I could have just done a road trip and seen all the same stuff? Then outline of rooftops in the distance showed up. Portree. Back in civilization, but no time to collapse just yet. I made myself tick through the list. Plug everything in, charge the gear, stock up on food. That quiet kind of admin that still feels like part of the journey. Then finally a reward, 1 cold pint of cider. I thought it might give me a second wind. Instead, it knocked me out cold. I slept for 12 hours straight. Face flushed, limbs heavy, not entirely sure if I was tipsy or just aggressively sunburned. Maybe both. Now back in civilization, doing what I'd normally do on a day off. Poking around a cute little cafe, sipping on a proper cup of coffee. I felt completely out of place in my dirty hiking attire, socks and sandals and all. But I think this is when it started to sink in. I felt like I started to embrace what it is to be a hiker trash. No longer fussed about how I looked, just constantly hungry, constantly tired and weirdly content. Well rested, mentally refreshed, I finally felt ready to chase the scenery I came all this way for. These coastal walks, sometimes they lull you into thinking it's just a gentle stroll through the countryside, and then suddenly you're scrambling up a slope so steep you feel like a sheep clinging to the edge of the cliffs. Except I'm not a sheep and I don't have 4 legs. It was a little preview of what's to come tomorrow. the landscape rising and falling in waves, cliffs spilling into the sea, the trail never quite letting you relax. And then in the distance I spotted it, the silhouette I had been waiting for, the unmistakable contours of the old man of Storr. That familiar spike, rising out of the land like something from another world. I couldn't help but smile. Seeing the massive car park at Storr, I felt that familiar reluctance, the same feeling I had back on the Causeway coast. Crowds aren't really my thing, especially not after days of quiet trails and solitude. But even then, I couldn't take my eyes off the old man. It holds your gaze in a way that few landmarks can, dramatic and otherworldly. A few hikers heading south along the Skye Trail had warned me that this is the last resupply point for a long while. So I did what any sensible hiker would do, stopped at a cafe, had another slice of carrot cake, and filled every bottle I had before heading back out. Most people were leaving just as I started dashing up the trail to the Storr. By the time I reached the top, the crowds had thinned. I know they're just a bunch of oddly shaped rocks. I could have taken a bus here like everyone else, and it's not like I haven't seen this view before. It's printed on every postcard, travel guide, desktop wallpaper. But still, standing there with the wind cutting through me and the last bit of sunlight catching the edges of the rock, it got to me more than I expected. I was freezing. I had no idea where I was going to sleep. But in that moment, none of it mattered. This was the dream. This was what I came here for. I then found myself standing in front of a wall of boulders, panicking quietly, not knowing whether forcing myself up and over would lead to calmer ground to camp on, or just more of the same chaos. I think that's when everything started to hit me. The fear of being alone, the fear of the elements, and you suddenly remember how small you really are out here. One moment you're on high from the view, from the sense of purpose, the next, the silence feels louder than it should. In the end, I decided the panic wasn't worth it. I stuck my thumb out and hitched a ride back to Portree, back to the safety of a campsite I already knew. I knew the trail would still be there tomorrow, waiting. It felt like cheating, a 10-minute ride, and just like that, all the effort, all the emotion, the struggle of the day, gone. Maybe it was a failure, but I've been telling myself, taking a break is part of finishing the journey. I'd rather be someone who tried and stumbled, than someone who let fear talk them out of trying at all. The truth is, I really love walking, but deep down, I still feel like a city girl playing dress up, an imposter in trail shoes, pretending to be someone braver than she really is. There's still so much I need to learn, about the land, about myself, and that's okay. I tried not to let that little hiccup define the trip. A quick bus ride and I was back where I'd left off the day before, standing once again in the car park beneath the old man of Storr. This time with fresh legs, a full pack, and just enough optimism to chase the morning light. Instead, I walked straight into thick mist, a heavy silencing fog that blurred everything around me. Oddly enough, it was exactly how I'd always imagined Skye in my head, woody, unpredictable, and full of secrets. And just as suddenly as the mist swallowed everything, I began to climb through it, then above it. I stood there, completely alone, as the first golden light broke through the horizon and struck the tips of those ancient rocks, now rising like islands out of a sea of cloud. For a moment it didn't feel real, like I'd crossed into another dimension, still dreaming. And up there, above the weather, above the noise, that's where I felt truly free. But I knew there were long miles ahead, plenty of elevation still to climb, so I let the dream slip behind me and carried on. Once again, I stood before the same wall of boulders that had turned me back the day before. But this time I was ready, mentally reset. I tightened my straps and scrambled upwards. The climb wasn't graceful. My pack threw me off balance, and I had to steady myself more than once. But thankfully the scrambling didn't last long. Then came the next challenge, navigation. Once I got up onto the ridge, the ground just stretched out before me, wide and pathless. No markers, nothing but instinct. I had to carve my own route, weaving my way down one slope and up the next. It got so steep I found myself crawling with both hands, heart racing, until finally the first summit of the day. Just 7 more to go. There wasn't a soul in sight. No hikers, no sheep, not even the occasional curious bird. No trees, no rocks, no streams to break the rhythm. Alone on this rolling, barren cliffside. The vegetation shifted beneath my feet, from yellow to green, but it did little to break the illusion. It felt like I was walking through a levitating desert suspended above the sea, empty, still, endless. They often say to take the path less traveled by, but out here I'm not so sure. Sometimes walking where others have walked before just makes life easier. There's comfort in knowing someone else has made it through, that the ground ahead has been tested. The real challenge I found is in choosing the path, it's spotting it in the first place. Out here, the trail is just a patch of grass, a little paler than the rest. From far away it's obvious, a faint thread cutting through the land. but when you're standing right on top of it, it vanishes, blends into the hill, and you're left guessing, trusting your feet. Eating and drinking well, it's one of those simple checkboxes we tick off during the daily ward round to assess how well a patient is. It always felt so basic, so obvious, until it's not. Out here, it becomes everything. And with wildfire risk so high in this dry, brittle weather, stopping to cook lunch didn't feel worth it. I didn't want to lose momentum either. Once I'm moving, I like to keep going. Breaking the rhythm just to set up my stove felt like a waste of precious time and energy. The sun was relentless. There was no shade, just heat bouncing off the ground, radiating back into me. I felt like a roasted chicken, skin crisping under my backpack straps, mouth dry, thoughts melting in the soup. I had never been more aware of how much I rely on the most basic things: food, water, a breeze. After I passed the last peak of the day, I knew I couldn't make the same mistake twice. I needed to find somewhere to settle before reaching Quiraing, before the crowds, before darkness falls. The landscapes around me grew stranger, more otherworldly with every step, but I was running on empty. My legs felt heavy, my throat was dry, my mind started drifting. Eventually, I stumbled into a valley, and it was as if the earth just swallowed me up. I sank into the ground without a second thought, too tired to care, too tired to move. What I didn't know was that if I had just walked 2 more minutes, I would have arrived at a flat platform, sheltered from the wind, with a beautiful view over Quiraing. It would have been the perfect place to set up camp. Crossing the road into Quiraing was supposed to bring me back into touristy areas, but it was still early in the morning and I was completely alone in this huge landscape. The colours of the land came to life under the soft morning light. Every shade of green, gold and grey glowing quietly, as if the world was waking up with me. Quiraing's alien landscape stretched out ahead, bringing back memories of the Icelandic highlands. Even the shade of mossy green was familiar, vivid, surreal. This was a place I'd only ever seen in pictures. Now it was real. I'm sure I'll come back to visit these iconic spots again someday, probably with friends or family, maybe on a relaxed road trip. And when I do, I'll think back to these crazy days in my 20s, when I was just stupid enough, brave enough to set off tracing dreams across the wild landscapes of Skye. And hopefully it will be a fond memory. The trail quickly shifted again, from a casual stroll among famous landscapes to loose gravel and slippery rocks. It took me way longer than expected to finally find my way down to Thru-hiking. But after Thru-hiking, the trail softened in the simple stroll along coastal paths. The wind picked up, and most of my energy was spent just trying not to fall over. I think I had read somewhere that the most challenging part of this section was supposed to be the bogs. But thanks to the stretch of sunny weather over the past few days, the ground had dried out. I passed by more houses than people as I limped my way towards the finish line. There wasn't much that felt remarkable, just steady footsteps. and a mind already halfway to the end. Until I spotted the lookout boggy glinting in the distance. The lookout boggy sits right on the cliffs near Rubha Hunish, the northernmost tip of the Isle of Skye. A tiny weathered shelter that once served as a Coast Guard lookout, now left open for weary hikers. It feels almost like a secret, perched at the very edge of the world. It's not much, just 4 walls, a bench, a table, and then the sea stretching out in front of you. But after days of wild walking, it felt like a gift, a place to catch my breath, to sit and reflect before reaching the true end. Inside I found a visitor's book, filled with scribbles from those who passed through. I added my own small notes, a tiny mark of my journey. Standing there looking out over the shimmering waters, with the Outer Hebrides faint on the horizon, it hit me how far I'd come. All the fear, all the doubts, all the times I wanted to give up, and yet here I was. The iconic phone box, standing quietly at the end of a winding road, marks it for real, a small, red, weathered symbol that I had truly made it. This trail, this wild walk across Skye, is no longer just a dream. It's real, it's mine, and it's part of me now. And just like that, a dream became reality, a memory I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. A year ago, walking the West Highland Way set me on a new path in filmmaking, in how I see the world and in how I see myself. It took me a long time to find the courage to set out again, afraid that nothing I created could live up to that first journey. Dreams are strange like that. You build them up in your mind for so long, and when you finally catch them, they're never quite how you imagined. Sometimes they're harder, wilder, more unforgiving. But sometimes, if you're lucky, they're even better,